Welcome to the Alain Elkann interviews, an unprecedented window into the minds of some of the most well-known and respected figures of the last 25 years.
Fanny Minesi, what is your curriculum of studies? Why did you become so involved in the life of bonobos? What is your background?
I don't think my study explain how I am passionate about bonobos, because I've studied law. I've done research in law. I have a master in research in law. I was very interesting about the economic system and how the juridic system helps the economic system to be efficient. So that was my major interest at that time. I was writing about DRC, the mining sector, the development of DRC. So that was my first topic of interest. And as you know, probably my mom is Claudine André. So she was involved into bonobo protection since 94. I'm born in 82. So in 94, I was a young girl. And this was happening inside my family. So I was touched by the dedication of my mom and how she built her organization. But I was seeing that from far away. And, sometimes when it's your close relative, you don't really understand exactly what they are doing. I knew that my mom was basically working for the rehabilitation of young orphans bonobos and trying to reintroduce them to a safe place. But I never imagined how the organization was building a new system in terms of management and things like that with the protected area, how she was involving the local communities and her difficulties also with the authorities, the national authorities. After I was a student, I was already came back to DRC, and it was like 8 years she was asking me, you should get involved into conservation projects, you should get involved into our organization. And they had a major problem with the state. The state wanted to rent biodiversity to other countries, as China is doing with the pandas. And they had received a letter from the national authorities asking for chimps and gorillas. And they have decided to make like a whole workshop with the national authorities, but also scientific, to explain why that should not be a strategy for looking for funds for conservation. And I was asked to be the translator from French to English and from Lingala. And since the conversation was very confidential, she asked me, can you do that? So for 3 days, I was translating. And at the end, I was starting off expressing also my own point of view, saying like, you have a lack of, like I was pointing what should be improved in the juridical system of the country. Like the country law didn't really recognize this kind of organization and the work they were doing. So I discovered myself seeing that I could do more and I wanted to help. And I was always a little bit in defensive because I didn't want to be like a mini mom, let's say, and I didn't think I was legitimate for the position. I always worried about the legitimacy of doing things. So then I started like this, and then I totally jumped into the position, and leading this organization has been like a very interesting journey. And my skills in law helped me, especially with the protected area, since we are building like a new model of management. It helps me being more creative and finding like good ways of making this model possibly working.
In 2023, because of your work for conservation in Africa recipient, you won the Tusk Award. The Tusk Award is an award that is under the patronage of the Prince of Wales. It's a great honor, but this is due to the fact that now, since some time, the director of the Friends of Bonobos of the Congo, right?
Yes.
The bonobos, they are from the family of the chimpanzee. They used to be called pygmy chimpanzee. and they live in the Congo Basin, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we are now, and they are frugivorous animals. They say that according to the George Washington University, they are the closest species of animals to humans, and they exist since 2 million years.
Yes.
Bonobos are around 30,000, 50,000, and they are endangered. So why are they endangered? And how do they live? I mean, what is your job with them? What do you do?
They are endangered because they are eaten. They are in danger because of the poverty, because of the demography. There is more and more people into cities, and those people need and eat wildlife, meat, and the demand of the towns are getting more and more. So the commercial hunting make a lot of pressure on biodiversity, and especially on great apes. The bonobo, the adults are being eaten, and the babies are falling into the traffic of animals as a pet, the pet trade. And what we are doing is we organize with the national authorities or provincial authorities the seizures of those orphans. We develop a networking of intelligence, and after the seizure, we rehabilitate those bonobo into a rehabilitation center in Kinshasa, 25 kilometers from Kinshasa. And we are taking care of those bonobo. And for the lucky one, they are selected for the reintroduction. And then a group of bonobo already organized and chosen by themselves are transported to Equateur Province, which is 800 kilometers away from Kinshasa. And there is a protected area where first they spend 6 months in quarantine, and then they are put into the community reserve called Ekolo Bonobo, and there they are totally in freedom.
They live mainly in forests. They live south of the river Congo, right?
It's not completely true due to the lack of information that we have about bonobo, but there is also a population of bonobo south of Lac Tumba, which is mosaic forest. If you see the map of the Congo, there is the Congo River going like this, and it's make this croissant south of the river when you have chimp north and gorillas east.
Gorillas and bonobos are different, right? The chimpanzee and the bonobos. The bonobos are smaller, right?
They are completely different. So physically, if you talk about those differences, a bonobo is much smaller than a gorilla and much, I would say, slimmer than a chimpanzee. Chimpanzee are like, in French, we say robuste. So they're more long, and they use the bipedi more often. They spend like 25 of their time on their feet. You know that gorillas doesn't make nest on the trees, but chimpanzee do so, bonobo also. He make night and daily nest. So physically, you have this really dark face. Chimp can be very pale. Bonobo are really, really black. And he have like a line in the middle of his hand, what we call favori, around his head. But besides that, it seems to be a long chimp. That's why for many years, scientific was thinking that it was a subspecies, but it's actually a totally different species from chimpanzee.
But when they see each other, it happens that
They
sometimes
see each other. They don't see each other. There's no interaction.
Never.
Never.
Because they don't live in the same place, right?
Exactly.
And how do the bonobo interact with the other animals?
You know, bonobo, they don't hunt. So the major difference between great apes in Congo are the behaviors. So usually gorillas and chimpanzee, all the society is organized around one big male. Contrarily, like other great apes, bonobos are led by the female. The society is led by the female, and they share the power, which is really, really different from the other species, including ours. The other difference is, for example, bonobos like to share. There is study showing that he prefer to share food. He enjoy share. He doesn't hunt like chimps. It's very extremely rare that we have assessed that a bonobo hunt. They use opportunistically advantage as like a bird nest. They take the eggs and they share it with, it's usually the female and the young kids who have access to those like privileged meal, but they don't hunt like chimp and there are no territory. So what is very difficult between chimp is like they have a territory and they will fight for their territory, and chimp can kill another chimp. They also kill the kids if they're not sure that that this is their kids. And this is not something happening in bonobo society. Nobody have seen a bonobo kill another bonobo. They solve their conflict without reaching the point of killing each other. And if there is enough food in their land, you will see different groups of bonobo sharing that food and sharing the territory. They don't fight for the territory. If there is enough food, you can see like 3-4 groups of bonobo like spending times together. And then we call that fusion and fission. So they have this way of having smaller groups and bigger groups depending the access of the food in forest.
Why is it a matriarchal society?
Why our is a patriarchal society? Do you have the answer to that question?
You said that in other species, women are not running the group. Instead, among the bonobos, the women are the boss. I mean, they are running everything.
Yeah, it's true.
And if I am not
but
right,
I cannot tell you why.
and if I am not wrong, they also can have children from any kind of bonobo. I mean, there is promiscuity, because you said before that the shim were killing children if they knew that they were not their children. Instead, I believe that in the bonobo, that doesn't happen. I mean, women are free to have children with whoever they want, and this is accepted.
Yes, because they are the leader. And actually, you have your rank. So your place in the hierarchy as a child is from your mother. So if your mother is high in the hierarchy, in the alliance of the female, you'll be a little prince. For example, your mom die, then you're going down into that hierarchy. So your place in the hierarchy depends to your mother. And the son will never leave the mothers. And the females will be going away from the group when they have their period. After that, they will trying to find another group.
It's said that the bonobos have a kind of a language. They talk to each other. It's a language that it's not yet understood, but they do have a language.
But that's true for all the biodiversity. Even trees speak to each other.
How do you know these things and many other things about them? Do you study them? Do you stay with them? How do you know all these details about how the society is organized, and the fact that you lose, you're the boss, then if you die, you go down in the scale and all that? How did you learn all this?
From the literature, there is some scientific research, scientific who have observed them into the wild, because yes, there is also the bonobo who are arriving in the center are a bit different because they have experienced a trauma. So they are a bit different from that. And also from observing them, so we have more than 70 bonobo in the center and more than 30 bonobo back to the wild. So yes, my knowledge coming from the literature and also by observing them for several years.
Since how long this species is studied? As you fight for conservation, right, of the species, because they are endangered, there are much less bonobos today than there were before. I mean, do we know about that?
So it's complicated to have like the truth, because you have to understand that they are discovered very late. Then they are living in a very remote place. So it's easier to send scientific somewhere else than in the middle of the Congo. That time it was Zaire. Then I guess instability was not helping the scientific study them. One of the oldest research site is from the Japanese researcher, and they help a lot discovering and learning about bonobos. but also it's just one group of bonobo. So then after, when other scientific have discovered other groups and observed them in other areas, they discover other behaviors. It makes difficult the research on bonobos because Congo is difficult. Their habitat is difficult for the scientifics. So the study around their density and the population was done by counting their nests, making like a scientific method of evaluation. Even like a few months ago, the scientific were still talking about the negative impact of that method because actually they were counting nest daily and night nest. And one bonobo can make one or several daily nests and only one night nest. So it makes the number wrong. That's why you have like a big fourchette, like they said in the 80s, you have 100,000 bonobos, and now they evaluated from 5 to 15,000, but nobody have counted them. I mean, Congo is continental. Have you seen the size of
Why are they endangered? What is the danger?
commercial hunting? They hunt them for the food.
Who's hunting them?
The commercial hunting is organized by people in town, usually like healthy people, and they are sending people in the forest to hunt. And those hunters usually have less than 10% than the final value of the meat. So the hunters are people living around the habitat of the bonobo, but the meat is doing a very long journey from where it's been hunted and compact and then sell to the market. There is several hundreds of kilometers sometimes from where the meat is being eaten and where it's being hunted. The demand of wild meats from the cities and the fact that we are more and more people, the demography is growing incredibly high in Congo. That demand of wild animal meat makes the pressure on the forest and on all the biodiversity, not only bonobos, but bonobos are making one baby every 5 years. It's difficult for them to resist to that pressure. They have like one baby every 5 years.
But this is obviously forbidden by the law to kill the animals.
Yeah, of course, but law is just a paper.
And as an organization,
what makes efficient,
as your organization who is fighting to protect these animals, these species, what do you do in order to protect them? What is your daily job in trying to protect these species?
So there's several approach. The problem is 360 degrees, so the solution has to be the same. And for a very long time, conservation was putting human being against biodiversity. So we're trying not to go with that approach. And we work with education. We work with the young children in school, trying to make them understand that our biodiversity has a value and more than the value of like being in a plate. So we work education, we work with the adults in Kinshasa, but also in places where there's still wild bonobo, to trying to make them understand what is a bonobo and why they should protect them. But near our protected area, we try also to develop programs for the community who have given land to the conservation, the one who are making this bet. The bet is, if we protect our forest, if we protect our biodiversity, is there any chance that we can develop through that? So that is also meaning including them into the management of the protected area, developed program that can reduce their dependence from the natural resources inside the protected area and improve how they live with the resources of the forest, because the population have access to the protected area and they collect like mushrooms, caterpillars, wood for construction, like they have access to different kind of resources. What we want to do is like reduce their dependency to the forest and improve the resources that they have. So we have program for it with honey, with like planting trees of caterpillars and things like that. But also schools. We work with 27 schools around the protected area. So our educators go there. We give them furniture, blackboards. We're talking about area where you have nothing, where states means nothing. You have Congo authority doesn't take care of health, education, there is everything. So they see conservation as an opportunity to have access to development, like basic development, talking about having clear water, having a health center that can gives you like even a vaccine, solar energy. It's always three different topics. It's like as a human being, we want all those three topics for everybody is education, health, and access to energy.
But you said, and it's written in the books, that bonobos and chimpanzee family are the closest animals to humans, right? How do they interact with human beings, with people, the bonobos? Are they friendly? Do you have an interaction? How does it work?
They should not interact with people. Normally, bonobo live into the forest, and when they see a human being, they're far away from. You don't see them. You won't be even able to see them. So it's the worst case scenario when you have interaction between wildlife and human beings. Usually, there is no interaction. There's like maybe observation. Maybe you can see their nest, but usually they're very cautious, and you don't see them. Hunters, what do? They hunt them when they are in their nest.
So you said they are hiding. There is no real interaction. But when they are in the center, when you try to cure them and to protect them, how they are?
Since they are very close, it's easier to understand them than a fish. So obviously, it's being close to our species make them easier to understand for our species. Yes, I mean, it's still a wild species, so they are wild, but they are nice creatures.
What does it mean, wild?
They have 10 times your power, and they're not cats. They are not pets. It's a wild species. Yes, you can have interaction with them. You cannot look in a chimp or a gorilla in the eyes, but you can have this with a bonobo and have the feeling that you're communicating without.
And where do they live? I mean, do they build a kind of a house? How do they create like little centers, cities? How do they organize their lives when they are in the woods?
In the forest, they have a home range around like 8 kilometers from 12 square kilometers, depending where is the food and the period of the year. Around when the sun goes down, they go up to the trees to make a night nest. So they construct that with the branches of trees. They're more sophisticated than daily nest. So their basic day is looking for food. They give a lot of places to the games and interaction between members of the groups. And then they make daily nest and move around according to the decision of the females.
They have a very intense sexual life.
They have sexual contact for different kind of reasons. Sometimes it can be to prevent a situation of stress, a stressful situation. So they have sexual contact, but they don't have, as human being, we can see like sexual relationships. They can have, sometimes you can see it as a handshake.
But obviously they must have had sexual relationship if they want to procreate.
They don't have periods like other species. The female, they have the same ovulation than the human beings. Actually, it's a bonobo who have helped developed the contraception pill for human beings because they have the same cycle than the human being females. And they are not like chimps who they have period, or like dogs. They are like human beings. They can have sexual relationship all the time if they want.
And women have a lot of sexual relationship?
Like men's, same thing. Females, sometimes males, young and old. All the sexual contact are not for reproduction. This is the difference between bonobos and other species. They have bonobo sexual contact for reducing the stress before having access to food, or usually it's to handle like a stressful situation for the group. It also shows that they are able to anticipate situation that will create stress for group members.
They live around 40 years.
Yes, 60.
And there is a large mortality of babies or not?
No, not really. Usually it can happen for young females for their first baby, but bonobo doesn't kill each other.
And do they have many illnesses or not?
They are very fragile with respiratory disease, and the complication due to normal flu for us can go through a pneumonia for a bonobo. So they're very exposed to transmission of disease and human disease.
Do they have their own medicines? They know how to cure themselves?
Yeah, they're very fragile. And this is why also you don't have a lot of bonobo in captivity like chimps. Chimps are really resistant and resilient to captivity. Bonobo, they usually just stop eating and drinking and they wait for them to die. And the only way to survive for bonobo is making the transfer of affection with someone or another bonobo. I mean, love is really important for their survival. And your second question was, are they using their own medicine? Yeah, there is research because bonobo can have the malaria parasites, but it doesn't make the symptoms. So there were different kind of research, and they eat plants and sometimes they eat argile. I don't know if you translate like that in English, but it's like the ground, the soil, very argileux. Yes, there is research about how and what kind of plants they are using and why.
And so how is your personal life? How much time you spend with these animals? How do you spend your life? I mean, what do you do?
I wish I could stay more often in front of bonobos, but this is not my daily life. I have to make space for that in my agenda because this organization is growing very fast. And as the beginning of every step, you have to be involved very much. So it's taking a lot of energy developing the new model of conservation that we want in Equateur, talking with the communities, looking for financement, because that is also the deal. I mean, if we want that Congo do more conservation, if we want Congo to value the protection of its natural resources, we will have to show the country that choosing protection of forest and biodiversity is leading to development for the people living around. Otherwise, we won't win the battle against the oils company, the logging company, and the other company who wants to have access to DRC land and resources. So the real challenges for the new conservationist will be to make sure that the economic interests and the conservation interest will go in the same direction.
And who is giving you the money?
Different, like private foundation, people who think that the last lung of our planet needs their help, but also international organization who's funding projects. More like our funding is coming from, I would say, 75% private people and the other 35% from international organization.
The Prince of Wales, as royal patron, is giving a great help to this conservation project.
I guess having ambassadors is always good because their words reach a lot of people that you will never have access to. Having a person like the Prince of Wales saying those words, encouraging his community to get involved into protection of nature can be a game changer. We need the help of everybody in this.
The climate change situation, I mean, all over the world, is damaging more the species. I mean, there is a great climate change influence in the change, or you don't feel it, or it's not relevant.
I would say that our major problem is not directly the climate change. I mean, if we continue doing what we're doing, we're going to lose a lot of species and land before climate change hit us. I would say, honestly, the poverty is the major threat to Congo biodiversity and his mining resources. So yes, we can see the difference, but that is due to, like, I would say, the expansion of the demography. I would say commercial hunting, because the forest of Congo is still pretty much intact, and thanks God, because, for example, our land is on a mega peatland. I don't know how familiar you are with the peatland. What is the peatland? It's like those forests are like swamp forests, and you have the leaves of the trees going down because it's inside the water. The carbon in that leaves are staying into the soil for like thousands of years. So what we discover is those forests are like a bank of carbon for our planet, but also it's like a bomb, because if you destroy those forests, you will release tons and tons of carbon kept into the soil. So protecting those areas are even more important than other lands. It's also in those areas that they have find like oil. Congo will have to choose between giving their lands to the oil company or to protected areas. But
And how is the political situation in Congo?
I mean, much better than a few years ago. Stability, transition, democracy. We have even a former president who's staying in the country. So I would say better, but we can do more. We can definitely improve. It's difficult. I mean, Congo situation is difficult. I mean, at the east side, you still have the land that is taken from the Congo to the M23, with strong evidence of the implication of Rwanda. So it's difficult to tell a country who are still in war. I mean, all the limits are with the situation of armed groups, and those groups have access to natural resources that is also feeding the story. I mean, if you see the map, where you have armed group is where you have natural resources. So this treasure of natural resources, DRC, sometimes it doesn't help us.
Are bonobos in the zoos? There are
Yeah,
zoos
an
in
important
London.
question. Exactly. Before the CITES was put into places, people who were selling bonobos. And traditionally, the Belgium, due to their close relationship.
Congo Belge.
Exactly. Belgium, Germans. There is bonobos in United States into zoos. So in Holland, in the US, there is bonobo. They are managed by the EASA, Alliance of Zoo and Aquarium Society, the one of French, the one of Europe's. They're trying to like exchange babies to avoid consanguinité. But from now, they are totally protected, and there is legally for those zoo, which actually it's a very good question, your question, because you know that the zoos into those islands are the good zoos, but there is also bad zoos in Dubai, in Emirates places. Some of them, they are not into those islands, but they still want to have wildlife. So what do? They send people to do capture into the wild. Because they are not into zoos, they cannot have access to the zoos transfer, which is free. And they are like putting money into wildlife trafficking. There were bonobo founded in China, bonobo founded in other country, Asian country, Moyen-Orient countries. For sometimes private people have like their own little zoos, and because it's very chic to have a gorilla in your garden, it can be even chicer to have one of the great apes that nobody heard about, because everybody know about chimps and gorillas, but now they start hearing about bonobos, and gosh, we call it the love ape. So that is really sexy, and people try to capture them. But what is very difficult is to keep them alive in captivity, because they're very, very fragile. So usually there's very few, or for a short period, because they die. What is actually from our organization different is when they arrive and they are small, we give them a surrogate mother who will give them love and affection. And this is why he wants to survive.
That's what is very interesting in the interview, is that you said that the real healing of these animals is love. There is a great search of love.
I think it's the same for our species. When you see the protocols with trauma, what you look for is security, is how you overpass the trauma is because you want to trust again. And trusting is coming from love emotion. It's so linked in our emotional organization, no?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for having been with us.
Thank you for having
Good luck and congratulations for your Tusk Award. And I hope you will achieve more and more results. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest for this species. I was in London a few months ago, and the Tusk Award ceremony is a big ceremony. There were like, I think, more than 300 people over there. And I'm telling you, nobody knew Bonobo. If you have to remember one thing of our conversation today, please remember that bonobos are a unique species and you cannot compare them with chimpanzee. They are so much different. Their behavior, the way they organize their society, everything, what makes a bonobo is pushing him from what makes a chimp a chimp.
Alain Elkann interviews.